Another day at the office or factory, or maybe you work on the road or in the air or on patrol. Maybe you're a student after another day of school, or maybe you don't have a job at all. Another day on the sofa. Whether you have or even need any of these things or not, you have a daily routine or expectation that will vary very little, if at all, from the previous day. In previous videos, I discussed how our bodies and psyches have needs and urges that require continual sustenance and maintenance. So your day will require meeting the demands of your body and psyche one way or another, and how you go about it will not be much different than the way you went about it the day before. If you have children or responsibilities that require sustenance and maintenance as well, then you're dealing with the more compounded version of the same issue. If you're addicted to anything, then you will have another additional daily requirement as well. And to avoid sounding completely pessimistic, there are people who enjoy their daily routine no matter how repetitive it is. Maybe you're fortunate enough to be making a living doing something you love to support yourself and or family. So for you, the routine isn't so bad. You look forward to getting out of bed and going about your day, even though you have a pretty predictable pattern of things as well. Then there are those in creative fields, or those who spend a lot of time creating during their days, whether it be music, painting, writing, choreographing, and so on. If you're someone fortunate enough to have a life dedicated to creating, then you are truly in the best situation this reality makes available. Of course, your body and psyche have their daily, if not hourly, needs as well. Humans are creatures of habit, they say, in that we tend to want to do things in a way that's familiar and comfortable to us repeatedly, even if how we prefer going about things is the most efficient means or not. And we all have tendencies and likings programmed into us through genetics and our upbringing through experience and environment. And with everything said, the effects of repetition is seemingly impossible to overcome or deny. It affects the way we perceive time. Someone living a more varied daily life might experience time differently than someone in a highly repetitive lifestyle, where one day isn't any different from the others, and years can go by into decades and not even feel like it, because there was little to no distinction in daily and weekly happenings for that person. Time flies when you're having fun, as they say, but that's over relatively short periods of time. But when 10, 20, or 30 years go by over lifetime, and 10 years ago feels like the other day, quote unquote, it's likely because not only as we get older, we get more used to time lengths, but we also fall into repetitive daily, weekly, and yearly routines. What you did on Labor Day 2 years ago was not much different than what you did on Labor Day 5 years ago. So why should your brain waste processing power making a distinction? Repetition is something we can't avoid, since this reality, our bodies, and our psyches make sure of that. It's still in one's best interest to live life as diverse as possible, day to day, week to week, and year to year, to limit the effects of wasted time, boredom, and misery. But I'm not so naive to think this is easy or even possible for most people to accomplish in life. Surviving in survival mode is the reality for most people here. and dedicating time to much else to break a survival routine just isn't feasible. For most, a 2-week vacation in a year is as good as it gets. This is where repetition can feel not comforting, but soul sucking. Some even describe it as a hell state, quote unquote. In Greek mythology, there's a story about a Greek king named Sisyphus, who founded the city later known as Corinth. Sisyphus garnered the ire of Zeus because he reported to a river god an abduction Zeus had committed and subsequently cheated death itself with his craftiness, which upset the god so much that Zeus had Sisyphus seized and dragged to the underworld, where his punishment from Zeus was to push a boulder up a hill, and when that boulder almost reached the top, it would roll back down to the bottom, where Sisyphus would begin pushing it up again. And this would go on repeat for eternity. That's just a quick Reader's Digest rundown of the myth, and I didn't tell it to simply hear giggles from a few teenagers when I say the name Sisyphus. This myth shows how repetition in a repetitive routine is used as a punishment to create an underworld hell state for a person. When reincarnation is mentioned, it can often be a controversial topic. Some would say it doesn't make much sense to their reasoning or religion, and where's the definitive proof? But for a lot of people, the thought of getting another go at life excites them. Maybe they can do it bigger or better next time and not put so much emphasis on their disappointments and failures like in their current life. While for others, reincarnation is the last thing they'd ever want to experience. Whatever juice they can see themselves getting from enduring life just isn't worth the squeeze. My reasoned take on all of this is we exist and are consciously aware right now. Many have beliefs, but no real knowing as to how or why we're consciously aware here, or if we even had a choice or consent in the matter. So if we're consciously existing now, then what's to prevent it from happening again, even after we die, since we don't know what will and mechanisms were at play to have us here now in the first place? Sure, we have an idea of our biological existence, but that doesn't explain the hard problem of consciousness, quote unquote, and why we're aware with these biological bodies. Now, I said nothing to prove reincarnation, but I felt I've reasoned enough as to why it's possible, since we cannot explain why we're here now. 20th century Romanian philosopher Emil Cioran concluded life and existence itself was an accident with mostly painful and flawed results, and non-existence or nothingness, quote unquote, is our home. Now, while a conclusion like this can be nihilistic and even despairing for most, Cioran used his outlook as a source of liberation, hope, and even joy, concluding if life itself is an accident, then there should be no need to take what happens in it too seriously or feel obligated to it. And looking forward to eventual nothingness would be his relief. While some can see the reasoning in Cioran's outlook, even this is no guarantee, since we're completely ignorant as to why we're conscious now and have no idea if it can happen again the same way it did now. The only plausible guarantee with Cioran's hope is that the current version in which we experience consciousness through may be non-existent forever, but not necessarily individual consciousness itself. And let's be honest, if the conditions of existence were entirely fun, considerate, and joyful, there'd be hardly anyone looking forward to getting out of it or wanting fundamental changes. In the Hindu philosophy and teachings, not in the Vedas, but in related Vedic literature, the concept of what is called the wheel of samsara is taught. In very general terms, it's a cycle of death and rebirth all life forms go through repeatedly in an illusionary reality. In Buddhism, it's a cycle of suffering through different hellish and sometimes heavenly realms, and the goal is to live and think in a way to break the cycle and get off the wheel altogether to achieve a state known as nirvana. So, yes, for many, the idea of living in this reality again and again does seem plausible and even desirable. But there are still many others who consider we exist in a world we didn't choose, a world that dictates our every action to survive in it, a world where repetition is prevalent and can seem like the punishment of a mythological king from a vengeful Greek god, and where it seems like a roll of the dice as to what an individual's circumstantial and genetic makeup will be while here. It's easy to see why many don't even want reincarnation to be a possibility, but can very well consider the state they find themselves in now and can possibly find themselves in again, hell.